press it. Come on, bring it on.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. Well, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine.
On July 13, 1956, a 21-year-old singer from Tupelo, Mississippi, released a song entitled Hound Dog. It soared up the charts, and by the 18th of August, Elvis Presley topped the Billboard Hot 100 and stayed there for a record 11 weeks. On March 22, 1963, 4 young musicians from Liverpool, England, released Twist and Shout. The song reached number 2 in the United States and helped initiate the Beatles into cultural superstardom. On November 7, 1969, a gifted quartet from Britain introduced the world to Whole Lotta Love, a gritty, raw tune that stayed afloat on the charts for nearly 15 weeks and helped usher the beginnings of hard rock and later sparked the formation of heavy metal. The theft and appropriation of black artists' work by white musicians has long been an issue within the industry. Appropriation is defined as the action of taking something for one's own use, typically without the owner's permission. In fact, all of the aforementioned songs were originally written or performed by African American artists, but were somehow manipulated by white artists who subsequently found much more success than the initial doer. The origin of this issue became prominent as black performers just began to enter into the mainstream music industry in the US. Many famous white musicians of the 1960s and 70s, such as Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones, cite early American blues artists like Robert Johnson and Lead Belly as some of their heaviest influences.
Black girl, don't lie to me. Tell me where did you sleep last night?
However, Depression and post-Depression blues artists like this were not particularly part of the United States popular culture per se, likely because they're black in a post-slavery country. And it was not until the start of the Civil Rights Movement in 1954 that African American musicians entered the common American musical media. In fact, the timeline of this issue near perfectly parallels that of the Civil Rights Movement. Elvis Presley is perhaps the most profound example of a white artist's theft of black music. Hound Dog was written by songwriters Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller and was originally recorded on August 13, 1952 by black, Alabama-born singer Big Mama Thornton. Thornton's recording of Hound Dog has been credited as helping spur the evolution of black R&B into rock music. However, most associate the tune with the King of Rock's 1956 rendition, while the actual composer Jerry Leiber cites Thornton's version as his favorite despite Elvis's reaching astronomically more success. Elvis Presley did not simply just cover a single black woman's song. Repeatedly, his musicality, specifically vocal quality, was used to produce a 1950s commercially friendly image, but with a rich, soulful tune. In other words, he was a handsome white man that appealed to white America, but mimicked the musical soul of black musicians. Actually, Sam Phillips, the manager of the iconic Sun Studios made famous by Presley, fully knew the competent musicianship and depth of black artists, but was also aware that an African-American singer would not sell like a Caucasian singer would. So, the King of Rock's career was actually built upon White's robbery of black art. As Phillips' assistant revealed, over and over I would hear him say, "If I could find a white man who had the Negro sound and the Negro feel, I could make $1 billion." Elvis went on to become the second best-selling musical act of all time, and Hound Dog has been certified 5 times platinum, selling over 5 million copies in the United States alone. Led Zeppelin, a group comprised of singer Robert Plant, guitarist Jimmy Page, bassist John Paul Jones, and drummer John Bonham, are the 6th best-selling musical act in history, with reputed sales reaching between 200 and 300 million units worldwide. All 4 members were born during the birth rate boom that followed the end of the Second World War. The group, especially guitarist Jimmy Page, stated that early American blues artists were mostly what he listened to as a child, and also what he played in a small skiffle band as a boy in Britain. African American influence can be easily heard on most of the band's records. Plant's raw, growly voice references both traditional R&B and emotion found in multiple slave songs. Jimmy Page's repeated use of twangy blues guitar notes resembles those used by musicians he idolized as a child. Jones' rhythmic use of bass guitar and occasionally whiny gospel-like organ also sonically parallels those of blues performers. All of these are clear examples of strong inspiration and admiration on the part of 4 young white performers from England. However, one song in particular released by Zeppelin is different. Whole Lotta Love was recorded by Led Zeppelin in May 1969 and released that November and included on their second studio album, Led Zeppelin II. The song reached the top 5 in several countries and sold over 1 million units in America. The song begins with a loose blues riff and descends into a break resembling those common in jazz performances. The tune is sometimes even classified as a blues rock song. However, the controversy lies in Whole Lotta Love's lyrical content. The opening verse begins the song with This reads as an example of typically sexual lyrics often associated with hard rock today. However, the lyrics are nearly identical to those of Muddy Waters' song written by Willie Dixon.
I ain't fooling, you be schooling. Baby, you know you need cooling. Warm on way down inside.
The rest of Zeppelin's lyrics on the song also parallel Dixon's. The chorus, I want a whole lot of love, versus I know you need love. The case was settled outside of court for an undisclosed amount of money, and Willie Dixon is now credited as a writer, along with the members of Led Zeppelin. A similar lawsuit was filed by the associates of Chuck Berry, who claimed the guitar progression used on the Beach Boys' iconic hit, Surfin' USA, was eerily close to that of Sweet Little 16. Again, Berry was awarded royalties and is now credited as a writer. Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Ringo Starr, and George Harrison made up the greatest sung musical act ever. With around 1 billion reported units sold, the Beatles are one of, if not the most influential act in the history of modern music. Their groundbreaking later works such as Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Abbey Road forever changed the landscape of popular music. However, their early work thrust the quartet into unimaginable superstardom. At one point, the Beatles held all top 5 spots on the Billboard Hot 100, a feat unheard of at the time and still today. The tune that held the number 2 spot in their takeover of the American media was Twist and Shout. The song features a memorable guitar riff, driving drums, and screamy, emotive vocals by John Lennon. This, among others like You Really Got a Hold on Me, were again originally recorded by black artists. The latter was written by Smokey Robinson and released by the African-American singing group The Miracles. The former was written by Burt Burns and Phil Medley and originally performed by the Top Notes in 1961. In spite of the fact that the Liverpudlian Quartet covered and were very successful with such songs, they differ from Presley and Zeppelin in that they did not necessarily steal or appropriate black music. They did not manipulate their voices to sound like the original singers and were genuinely massive fans of African American music. In fact, author and professor Jack Hamilton states in his book that the Beatles were, quote, tireless evangelists of black music.
They were really conscientious about crediting their influences and, shining a light on artists who weren't as well known in England or even in the States.
In this way, the Beatles offered a compromise, as they also refused to play at segregated venues in the United States during the Civil Rights Movement, causing countless bars and clubs to evaluate their ethics and alter their rules. Furthermore, near the end of their career as a group, they released Blackbird, a Paul McCartney penned song that metaphorically references the struggles of black women in the United States. The 1950s and 1960s brought about intense, racially driven conflict based upon the preposterous discrimination African Americans faced in the United States. Inevitably, social culture was influenced by this political conflict. Some view white artists' success with black music, such as Elvis Presley's Hound Dog, as bridges built between sides to unite two oppositely privileged cultures. However, at the root of this is the theft and appropriation of black musicians' art caused by the distinct class, social, and political advantage of Caucasians, particularly in a post-slavery America.
You ain't nothing but a